Somewhere between fact and folklore lies Paranormal M. We chase down the mysteries others fear to touch. Subscribe now, because the truth is never safe. When we were kids, my younger brother and I went through a lot of strange experiences. A while back, I shared a story about the woman who wailed outside her window. Sadly, my little brother passed away unexpectedly about 9 years ago now. Every time I think about him, I realize how many bizarre things we went through together. Things that I still can't quite explain. This particular event happened when we were around 9 and 11. Ignore the plane taking off over my head, if you can, please. So at the time, it was just the three of us in the house. My mother, my brother, and me. Our father worked abroad, so he was away for months at the time, and we had 4 older siblings, all grown and living on their own. Our house had a lot of music in it. My mother insisted that every one of us learn an instrument. My brother played violin, I played piano. We had an old mahogany upright in the living room and a violin case that always stayed closed when not in use. One afternoon, my brother and we got into an argument. Can't even remember what it was about. It escalated fast, and soon we were shouting and wrestling in the upstairs hallway. Our mother came up and separated us and told us that she was done dealing with our nonsense. She went to her room, slammed the door, and said she didn't want to hear another word. We cooled off for maybe an hour before fighting started again. Same hallway, same childish rage. And then, without warning, we heard something. The sudden, violent screech came from downstairs, the unmistakable sound of a violin string being pulled too hard. Then came a rapid series of sharp, angry notes, like someone dragging the bow across the strings with force. My brother and I froze, and we both knew the violin was in its case. We were the only ones home. We bolted to her mother's room, pounding on her door and screaming for her to open it. When she did, we rushed inside and locked it behind us. The sound had stopped, but my heart was racing so hard I thought I'd be sick. Mom told us to calm down and said we were imagining things. And eventually, we all laid down together and she fell asleep quickly. My brother, too. And I was the only one still awake. At some point, I drifted off, or at least I thought I did, and woke up unable to move. I could see the room, but my body felt heavy and pinned to the bed. Deep humming came from the corner near the door. It was low and metallic, like a bow scraping slowly across a string. The air felt colder there. Tried to call out to my mother, but no sound would come. Then in the dim light, I saw a shape, a person standing near the door. Slowly, it moved closer. My eyes strained as the figure came into focus. An old woman with tangled white hair with her eyes blank and glistening. She looked heartbreakingly sad. And then came the smell, something like damp wood and rot. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I begged silently to wake up, and suddenly my body jerked violently. I fell off the bed and the sound stopped. The room was silent again. And when I sat up, the corner was empty. No humming, no figure, just darkness and my mother's steady breathing. And I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I told her what I saw. She listened quietly and then told me not to mention it to my brother, and she didn't want to frighten him. I think he already knew, because a few nights later I heard the violin again. The Night with the Red Eyes. And I still remember that night. The kind that burrows into your memory and stays there. It's like it's got nowhere else to go. It was late July, and our little community in northern Ontario was buzzing with their annual summer gathering. Barbecue smoke and music echoing across the ball field, laughter rolling through the night. And I was 14 then, too young for the beer garden and too old to fall asleep early. Mom was out at the sort of event that we had there, and she was helping with food, and family friend Sam was renting our spare room for the summer. I didn't mind being alone. I had the house to myself and popcorn in my hand. YouTube was on the TV, a soft breeze drifting in through the kitchen window. Everything was calm. Around 2:30 in the morning, the front door creaked open. Sam stumbled in cheerfully, and he was flushed and smelling like campfire smoke and cheap beer. "Hey, kiddo," he slurred, flashing a grin. "Still up?" He rummaged through the fridge and started crafting what I can only describe as a tragic sandwich. Bologna and mustard and something that looked like strawberry jam. Ew. As I laughed, he froze mid-bite, eyes locked on the kitchen window above the sink, and said, "You see that?" I frowned and said, "See what?" He didn't move, because in the window, there was 2 red eyes staring back. The kitchen light flickered once, and he blinked, shook his head, and muttered, "I'm just seeing things." Shuffled off to bed. I figured that was that. But the quiet that followed wasn't normal quiet. It was heavy, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. The hum of the fridge faded. The TV began flipping through channels on its own, static and voices and flashes of light. My heart pounded as the kitchen bulb started to blink erratically, and in silence, TV went black. A second later, one of Sam's earbuds, just the rubber tip, it flew off the kitchen table and landed at my feet. I stared at it completely still, and those things don't just pop off. The TV flickered back to life as if nothing happened. And I called for Sam twice. No answer, and the house felt too small suddenly, like the walls were listening. So I grabbed the phone and I called my grandma. She was annoyed at first, thought I was pulling some late-night prank, but she came anyway. When I got to her house, she set up a bed for me and said softly, "Nothing's gonna hurt you here." And I believed her until I lay down and felt the faintest pressure on the blanket above my chest, like tiny feet jumping playfully back and forth, and I swear in the dark I heard giggling. By morning, everything was fine again. And I'll never forget those red eyes or how the house went still, like something unseen had stopped just to remind me that the night is never truly empty. The Screaming Fields. So this happened when my cousin and I were around 10 and 13. We grew up on the edge of a little lakeside town, the kind of place where every road eventually turned into dirt and every dirt path led to someone's farm. Our house sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac. It backed onto endless fields of corn and old windbreak trees that groaned when it stormed. To our left was a quiet neighbor, and to our right a row of wild blackberry bushes that marked the border between the neighborhood and, well, really, farmland. The first few fields belonged to a family who grew mostly corn and canola. We'd made little gaps through the brambles. That way you could sneak in and explore, and it was kind of our whole world. A maze of fields and the hidden creeks and the smell of soil and rain. One summer night, my cousin and 2 friends and I were out front kicking a ball and riding our bikes in circles under the streetlight. It must have been around 10 p.m., just dark enough that the sky was purple and the crickets were loud. We were the last house before the open countryside and the end of everything. And that's when we heard it. A long, sharp scream coming from the cornfield. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't an animal either. It had that mix of fear and fury that makes your skin crawl. Though at first we laughed, thinking it was maybe a fox or someone's goat. Naturally, being dumb kids, we went to look, and we crawled through the blackberry gap there, and we stepped onto a tall piece of corn. It was all just whispering in the wind. The stalks were high up to the shoulders, and you really couldn't see much. The sound had stopped, but then it started again. Only now it was coming from the direction that we'd entered. We looked at each other, half joking and half nervous, and then it screamed again. This time behind us, and that's when it stopped being funny. The sound began to move, and it was fast. It went from one end of the field to the other in seconds. Always just out of sight, too. Sometimes far, sometimes right beside us. The stalks didn't even rustle. It was like it was skipping through the air. Nobody said anything. We just ran. My cousin tripped and my friend started crying. We tore through the gap in the bushes, scraping our legs raw. The moment our feet hit the pavement and the glow of the streetlight, the sound stopped. It was clean, like somebody hit mute. We stood there gasping, hearts racing, staring at the black sea of corn. There was nothing, no movement, no sound. Just silence and the hum of a sodium lamp. That night we didn't tell our parents, but my cousin refused to go near the fields again, even during the day. He passed away a few years after that in that same house. And for years after, people swore they saw an old woman walking in the fields at night, bent and barefoot, crying softly into the wind. The Visitor in the Corner. After my sister passed away, the silence in my apartment began to grow heavier. She and I had shared a lifetime of odd, unexplained moments. Things we'd laughed off back then, but that night alone again, I wasn't laughing. Sleep had become impossible since her death, and the nights were long, and I kind of learned to live with them. At around 2 a.m., I was editing a short film, just trying to stay busy. That's when I decided to rest my eyes for a few minutes on the couch. The next thing I knew, I woke up gasping, or thought I did. The room was pitch black, and not dim and not dark, but black, like the air itself had turned solid. My heart was already racing because the dream I had just left behind was so strange, and I was standing exactly where I was now, fighting something I couldn't see. I tried to sit up, but nothing happened. My mind moved, and my body didn't. Not a finger, not a breath. Sleep paralysis. I hadn't felt that since I was a child. But that old panic came flooding back like it had been waiting for this moment. And as my eyes adjusted, I felt a shift in the air and pressure. It was like someone else was breathing in the same room, and I could hear faint murmurs. It was too low to make sense of. And then, with a sharp click, the light from my desk lamp flicked on by itself, and in the glow I saw him. A tall, paper-thin figure standing by the far corner. His outline was darker than the shadows around him, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned hat. He didn't move, he just stood there watching. And then, slowly, the light dimmed again until all I could see was that silhouette moving closer. My chest was pushed down against the couch cushions. My face sank into the fabric. I couldn't breathe. I just remembered thinking, this is it. I'm gonna die like this. When I suddenly woke up again, the room was bright, and the clock on my phone said 3:52 a.m. My limbs, they just wouldn't move. My eyes darted toward the window, and that's when I noticed him sitting across from me. He was there, that same tall figure now seated in the armchair opposite of me, perfectly still. There was no face, just darkness shaped like a man. He reached out one slow movement and touched the top of my head. The movement his hand made contact, the moment. I felt my body breaking apart, and not pain, just the sensation of dissolving, like dust blowing off into space. The world turned black again. In that darkness, fragments of my life replayed like childhood and laughter in her voice. Then the pull downward or upward, I couldn't even tell. Till a bright light filled everything, and in that light I felt her. Not her body, but her, the part of her that was still somewhere. I woke up sprawled on the floor and the sun was already high. My phone read 10:11 a.m. 7 hours had passed, and I don't know if I ever truly woke up at all that night. All I know is this: the shadow in the corner hasn't returned, but sometimes when I'm drifting off, I still hear two voices whispering, mine and hers, and something else just beyond them listening. The Echoes in Willow House. I used to laugh at ghost stories, right up until I walked into Willow House. That's what people in town called it. Nobody really remembered who Willow was, though. They said the house had been abandoned since before their grandparents were even born. Everybody had a story. Soft humming in the walls or lights flickering through the cracks. Footsteps pacing when no one was inside. But no one ever dared to really check these things. No one except for me. It happened on a night thick with fog and drizzle, a kind of night that feels like the world's holding its breath. I'd have enough of these whispers and the fear that they'd built around that house. So I grabbed a lantern. I trudged up a muddy path, the rain soaking through my jacket. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. Even the crickets stopped. The house stood crooked against the sky, and its windows like half-closed eyes. The front gate was rusted shut, but I pushed through. The smell hit me first, like damp wood and mold and something sweet and rotten underneath. Inside, everything was coated in dust, but the air felt alive and charged. My lantern flickered and shadows stretched across this peeling wallpaper. I walked through the living room past the piano with missing keys and paused when I thought I heard a sound, soft and faint like a sigh. And then clear as breathing. Eli. My name. I froze and the sound wasn't an echo. It was too close and too real. My pulse jumped. I told myself it was the wind. Trick of the sound or anything. And then it came again, gentle and deliberate. Eli. Upstairs. My throat went dry. Every instinct was screaming to leave, but something else, curiosity or stubbornness, I don't know, made me climb. The stairs groaned underneath my boots, and the air got colder with every step. At the end of the hallway, the doors to the attic hung slightly open. I pushed it wider, and the smell of old wood and dust was filling my lungs. My lantern's light danced across the room, landing on an object in the center, and it was large. It was an oval mirror. It was veiled with a gray sheet. The whisper came again and said, "Eli, come see." I reached out, pulling the sheet away, and the mirror's surface was cracked and warped with age, but my reflection wasn't right. It's like it smiled before I did. I stepped closer with my breath fogging the glass, and the reflection's eyes darkened. It was empty, stretching into pits of black, and my stomach turned. "Stay," it whispered, my own lips unmoving. The floorboards rattled and the air tightened, and I stumbled back, but the door slammed shut behind me. The reflection's grin widened until the skin split at the corners, and from each crack in the mirror, more faces pressed forward, men, women, children, all screaming. And behind them I saw her, a woman in a gray dress and hair tangled, eyes hollow as the night. She lifted her hand and touched the inside of the mirror. My breath was like I was feeling this cold brushing on my cheek. "Stay with us." I turned to run, but the floor gave way beneath my feet and everything went black. Morning came. Willow House was still there in the fun. The locals said they found the lantern at the foot of the stairs, burned out and cold. No sign of me. Only the mirror in the attic remained, uncovered now. And if you look long enough, you'll see a new face among the others, eyes wide open, waiting. The nights I wasn't me. Now, I've always been a sleepwalker. My whole life, really. Nothing dramatic, just the usual waking up in weird places and mumbling nonsense. Occasionally rearranging my furniture like a confused ghost. But there were 3 nights that were different, so strange, I'm not really sure if I can call them sleepwalking. The first time I'm 14, I'm hanging out with 2 of my best friends. We just graduated from middle school and thought we were so grown up. We had 1 sip of vodka, literally a sip. Decided to watch the rain from the porch. Everything was fun and harmless, until I suddenly felt like I slipped out of my own body. I could see myself from above, laughing in this awful high-pitched way. My body started swaying, then shaking like something was trying to crawl out of me. Then I dropped all 4s like some possessed animal. Started crawling toward my friends, and my mouth was stretched into this awful grin. My eyes were wide open, and I was growling, like actually growling. I could see them frozen and terrified and crying. And then I snapped back, just click, and it was me again. And they were screaming at me to leave, and I tried to tell them I didn't remember any of it. I didn't. They didn't believe me. Honestly, I wouldn't have either, I guess. But fast forward, and I'm 20, living in my first apartment. Dusty old place that I later found out had belonged to a guy who died there of a drug overdose. My boyfriend and now husband. Congratulations. We started noticing odd things, like a flickering lamp or a door unlocking itself, cabinet slamming. We laughed it off until we heard breathing. Not around us, but in our ears. One night I went to bed early. He stayed up gaming, and then slam. Bedroom door flies open. He looks up and sees me peeking at him from the hallway. Only my eyes are closed and I'm smiling. Slowly, I walk backward into the dark bathroom, still smiling with my eyes shut. Then I lean out again from the bathroom door with the same grin, the same empty eyes. He doesn't move, but I run toward him. He freezes, I stop, open my eyes, smile wider, and walk away. He checks on me, and I'm asleep, peaceful as ever. By 22, we'd moved into a new apartment. It was clean and pretty bright and nothing haunted, thank God. Then one night, the bedroom door slammed open again. My husband didn't even flinch this time. "It's happened again," he whispered. Sure enough, there I was, eyes closed, smiling, peeking at him from the dark hallway. He didn't react, but when I started running toward him faster than I should have been able to, he screamed my name. I woke up right then, standing in the middle of the living room, shaking. He told me everything the next morning. Hasn't happened again since, though. Just the usual sleepwalking and a little crying, some talking in my sleep. When I was a kid, I used to see this shadow figure that had peeking at me from the corner of my room. It seemed to get closer every time I blinked, and one night I just screamed and never came back. Maybe he really wasn't gone, and maybe he's been following me this whole time, just waiting for me to fall asleep again. The Boy Who Slept Through the Shadow. It happened not too long ago. The family who kind of lived on this quiet, gated lane is my boyfriend's parents in the Florida Hills area of Tijuana, Mexico. Florido Hills, excuse me. My boyfriend first told me about it one night, and recently my sister-in-law confirmed that every bit of it was true. It was a regular Saturday evening. The street was peaceful, and a few kids still played outside. The rest of the families had gone indoors for dinner or TV. My boyfriend's family was relaxing in their living room when somebody started knocking on their door. My mother-in-law went to go check. It was a neighbor, a woman that she knew well. They were looking pale and desperate. Their little boy was missing. They had searched every corner of their house and even around the neighborhood, but no one had seen him. Knowing that the woman wasn't one to play pranks, my mother-in-law offered help. Soon, everyone on the street joined in the search, shouting the boy's name and checking garages and rooftops and backyards. Finally, somebody called the police. Not long after the patrol arrived, a thunderous bang shook the neighborhood. It was like a heavy box dropping hard into the floor, and it came from inside the missing boy's own house. His mother ran inside, followed by the others. And there he was, the little boy, lying face down on the dining table. It's as if he had simply dozed off mid-meal. His half-empty bowl of cereal sat right next to him. Everybody was shocked, but, well, relieved. Still, nobody can understand how they had missed him in a small, well-lit house they'd already searched a dozen times now. And life went back to normal after that, or at least that's what everyone thought. 2 weeks later, the boy's mother visited my mother-in-law for coffee. They chatted about everyday things until the missing day topic came up, and then her tone changed. She explained that her son had been eating cereal at the table. She was upstairs just a minute to grab her phone charger. When she came back down, he was gone, and she checked the whole house, and there was nothing. No door had opened. The neighbors outside swore no child had stepped out. Then came the bang. She ran back inside, and there was him again, exactly where she'd left him, his head resting on the table beside a cereal bowl. Later that night, when everyone was calmer, she asked him what had happened, and his answer still haunts her. He said he had fallen asleep at the table, but when he opened his eyes, the living room was darker like twilight. In the corner, there was a tall man in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat watching him. The man smiled and asked, "Would you like to see something special?" He was holding a small old-fashioned key. The boy said he felt like he had to take it. When he reached out his hand, everything went black. Next thing he saw was his mother shaking him awake. The family has since moved away, and no one really talks about it anymore. But every time my boyfriend passes that old house in Florido Hills, he says he still feels like someone's watching from that window. Florido. The Other Mother with the Blue Dress. My close friend has a nearly 3-year-old boy. The sweetest, gentlest little soul, but lately, he's been saying things that are kind of hard to shrug off anymore. About a year and a half ago, they moved into a cozy house in a quiet street. Before that, they stayed for a couple of months in her aunt's guest cottage while we were waiting for renovations to finish. She and her sister have always been like twins, raising their kids side by side. They'd swap babysitting duties, and they'd see each other several times a week at least. Her son, who we're going to call Eddie, which isn't his real name, often talked about his other mommy. My friend used to assume he meant her sister. Easy explanation since the kids are always together. But lately it feels off, and he's also been saying, "I want to go back home," even when they are home. And when she tells him, "We're home, sweetheart," he just shakes his head and whispers, "Not this one." During their stay at the aunt's place, strange things started happening. Her older boy, around 3 then, while Eli was barely walking, began talking about the lady in the window. They brushed it off, thinking it was just something from a cartoon. But one night, Eli cried for hours, and when my friend picked him up, she said a wave of dread hit her so hard she nearly dropped him. Something inside her screamed to put him down and run. And instead, she ran out of the room holding him tight and slept on the couch with her heart pounding with the lights on. She swears she could feel eyes on her from the hallway. A few months after moving into the new house, though, her husband jolted awake in the middle of the night. An elderly woman in a long blue dress was standing at the foot of their bed. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He said she looked furious, and then she screamed, "I can't do this anymore," and then vanished. He chalked it up to sleep paralysis, but it left him shaken for weeks. And then today, while playing outside, Eddie asked again about this other mommy. My friend asked, trying to sound calm, "What's the other mommy like?" And he said, very serious, "She has a blue dress and she flies at night." His dad went into the room later and caught him whispering to someone. When asked who he was talking to, Eddie said softly, "My other mommy, she's back." They keep a close watch on what the kids watch. Nothing scary, nothing weird, but still, somehow the stories keep getting darker. The Echo Beneath the Fog. Have you ever wondered if the streets that we kind of just casually wander through, maybe they might remember more than we do, if they hold secrets heavier than the fog that cloaks them? This thought drifted into my mind one misty evening as I cut through an old forgotten lane in Missouri. That's literally spelled Mussorie. Missouri. Not Missouri. It wasn't a path I usually had, and, well, it was lined with crumbling cottages and overgrown ivy that looked like they hadn't felt like a broom or even footsteps in decades. Locals said the place was haunted by echoes, soft footsteps and faint humming. But aren't all hill towns stitched with such noises? That night, though, something did feel different, as from behind me came the faint chime of anklets, delicate and measured, getting closer. I turned around. There was nothing, just the wind swirling it was like smoke around this flickering street lamp out there. I smiled nervously, remembered the ghost tales my mother told me. The women who bound their souls to silver anklets, doomed to wander forever. Then a breath brushed past my neck, cold, human, and close. The whisper followed, soft but steady. "You shouldn't have left me waiting." The words rooted me to the ground. Who said that? Why did they sound so heartbreakingly familiar? When I turned again, she was there. A woman draped in an old-fashioned cerise color of moonlight. Her face was hidden by a thin veil, and her anklets glinting faintly in the fog. "Who are you?" I stammered. She didn't answer. She only tilted her head, and suddenly, I wasn't in that lane anymore. I was someone else. I was a man standing under a wedding canopy, then walking away from it. A woman's cries, the sound of anklets fading, then water swallowing everything whole. The vision broke and Elaine returned. "Do you remember me now?" she asked, her voice almost sounding like glass. I shook my head desperately and said, "No, I don't know you." Her veil lifted slightly, revealing hollow eyes filled with, rage. Rage and longing. "You carry his face, that's enough." The fog thickened and her outline faded like a breath on glass. The last sound was the soft chime of anklets fading into the wind. I ran, and I didn't look back. Sometimes when the night falls quiet and the air turns damp, I still hear them, those faint anklets in the dark, and I wonder, do the dead really haunt us, or do we unknowingly haunt them first? The The Shadow at 3:33. For most of my life, I've never really been into anything paranormal. I mean, sure, I've watched the random creepy YouTube video at 2 a.m. like everyone else. Never thought much about it, though. Still, a few weird things have happened to me that I can't exactly explain. When I was 9, my grandmother passed away, suddenly in her sleep at least. I was the one who found her the next morning, and it was a lot to process for a kid. Yeah. A couple of weeks later, I woke up drenched in sweat with my heart pounding. I needed to use the bathroom, which meant walking past her old room. As I walked down the hallway, this cold feeling came over me. Like someone was standing right behind me. I tried to ignore it, but when I passed her door, I saw something. A shadow, and it was tall. Still just standing in the corner, and I didn't stop to look twice. I bolted straight to my mom's room. Of course, she told me it was just my imagination, but I know what I saw. Years went by. Things like that stopped happening, and life moved on. Fast forward to now, which I'm 15. And lately, I've been reading a lot more about ghosts and sleep paralysis and all that. 2 nights ago, I woke up, or at least I think I did, lying on my stomach facing the window. I could see my whole room, and there it was again, the same shadow. Except this time, it was beside my bed. I tried to move to scream, but nothing worked, and my body was frozen. Its arms were too long, like wrong long. It was just staring. Couldn't even breathe properly, and it felt like forever until I woke up again. I was trembling. My neck was burning, and when I checked the time, it was 3:33 a.m., and yep, 3:33. When I looked in the mirror later, I had 3 faint scratch marks on my neck. No idea where they came from. And I decided not to think too hard about it. Last night was worse. I was deep asleep when I felt a hand pressed down on my chest. Like it was pinning me to the bed, and I shot awake gasping. My room was usually dim lit from the moonlight, but this time it was pitch black. Even after waiting for my eyes to adjust, there was nothing. Turned on my phone flashlight, stumbled to the switch, flicked the light on, and then off again just to test it. The room wasn't dark anymore. It was back to that faint moonlight glow. I don't know how to explain that one. Today's been quiet, and it's been raining nonstop. I've been trying to focus on homework, but I can't shake the feeling that tonight might not be as peaceful as I hope it to be. Sorry if I'm rambling, but if anybody has an idea what this could be, I'm all ears. The House with the Hidden Light. When I was about 9, maybe 10, my mom found this incredible old townhouse on the edge of the city. Had a big bay window in the living room and crown moldings in the ceiling. A kitchen so bright it felt like daylight even at dusk. Every corner had built-in shelves, and there was this little sunroom that looked out over a small garden. It was the nicest place we'd ever lived in. I remember thinking, wow, we finally made it. During the walkthrough, the owner told us the house had been a safe point on the Underground Railroad. She said there was once a signal lamp in the attic window. It would glow at night to guide those seeking shelter. Then she led us to a built-in bench by the stairs and pressed on one of the panels. It slid open to reveal a crawl space under the steps. She let me squeeze inside just for fun, showing me where people used to hide. Weird sort of fun, but okay. It was small and dusty and cold, but I thought it was the coolest secret room ever. The upstairs had 2 bedrooms, though it was listed as a 1-bedroom unit. My mom claimed the bigger room with the walk-in closet, and I got the small space downstairs that used to be a study. It still smelled like varnish and old paper, and then the owner just kind of took us down to the basement. Laundry one side, history on the other. She said the house used to belong to an undertaker. and there were some strange metal tools and glass bottles with faded labels in the locked cabinet. She told us not to go in there, and I didn't argue. Sounds like they were canning fruit. Then she pointed out a bricked-up tunnel near the far wall that once led to the back garden for escapees, and they'd follow the light, she said. No red flags, right? So the first encounter. The first time something happened, my brother was babysitting me. He was about 18 already, too cool to be stuck watching his little sister. I kept bugging him for dinner while he was glued to his video game. Finally, he lost patience and shoved me into my mom's closet. Joked that maybe the ghost could feed me. He locked the door and walked away. I was furious. I pounded on the door until my hands hurt and started crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I must have passed out. But just before I hit the floor, I swear, someone caught me. I remember looking up and seeing a woman in plain blue dress and a bonnet. Her face was kind and her smile soft. She brushed my hair from my forehead and whispered, "You're safe, little one." Then everything went black. When I woke up, my mom was yelling at my brother, and I was still locked in. I sat up and looked toward the small closet window. She was standing in the garden, that same woman waving at me, and then she was gone. The second encounter. This one was entirely my mom's doing. She brought home a Ouija board. Her best friend came over, and after a few glasses of wine, they decided to see if anybody was still around, so to speak. At first it was just jokes, asking the board silly questions, and then Mom asked if there were any spirits in the house. Planchette moved to evil, E-V-I-L. Both of them froze, and a second later, every window in the living room slammed shut. And they screamed. I tried to burn the board in the fireplace, but the flames flickered green, and something or someone laughed. And that laugh still echoes in my memory. She threw the board out into the garbage that night without saying goodbye or closing that session. The third encounter. This is the one I'll never forget. The one that changed everything. A few months later, I woke up in the middle of the night to a figure standing near my desk. Just blackness shaped like a man. My body locked up and he moved fast right to my bedside and the air turned freezing. Couldn't even scream. He leaned close and whispered, "You're mine." I tried to fight, I couldn't move, and my feet lifted off the bed and I was floating. I was held by something I couldn't see. I prayed and I was desperate. A small squeak came out of my throat and suddenly I could scream, and scream I did. My mom ran in with her eyes wide and saw me hanging midair, and she shouted, "In the name of Jesus Christ, let my daughter go. You are not welcome here." The moment she said it, I dropped onto the mattress like a stone. We moved out within 2 weeks. Mom called the landlord the next morning and asked to break the lease. The woman didn't even hesitate. "Of course," she said quietly, as if she'd been expecting that call all along. The Woman of Silver Mist. I've never seen or read anything that even comes close to what I experienced that night. And I've always been skeptical and logical even. Nothing before or after has ever compared. If I had to guess, the whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes. It was late 2001, 12:45 a.m. Cold, silent December night in Portland. The kind of night where you can see your breath drift to the stars. I was walking home from a friend's apartment, same route I'd taken countless times before. No cell phone, no headphones, just me and the sound of my own shoes on the sidewalk. I had my coat zipped up, hands in my pockets, and the streets were empty, completely still. I took a left at a small intersection that would lead me down the final stretch toward my neighborhood. And that's when I saw it. Something that looked like a pale ribbon of mist hanging in the air just above the height of the street lamps. It caught my eye because the sky was perfectly clear, not a cloud in sight. Still, I kept walking, assuming it was just some strange patch of fog from the river nearby. A few minutes later, about halfway down the street, I looked up and froze. Floating above the road, maybe 20 feet up, was what I can only describe as a woman made of light and vapor. Their body had the texture of a cloud, but her outline was sharp and distinct. She wasn't glowing like a bulb, but instead she was shimmering softly, like moonlight through thin smoke. Around her head was a faint ring of silver light, not hovering above but wrapping her completely. The halo that pulsed gently like it was alive. She smiled at me, a calm, kind smile. Then she raised her hand and waved. I didn't move, and I couldn't. My hands stayed buried in my pockets. I was frozen there. I remember looking down at the pavement, my heart pounding, unsure whether I should run or speak or just keep walking. And after a few seconds, I looked back up, and she was still there, gliding silently above the street in the same direction I was going. She wasn't looking at me anymore, just moving forward slowly and gracefully. And I followed her from below, half terrified, half entranced. I kept thinking, this can't be real. I tried to rationalize it. Fog, light tricks, fatigue, but the air was clear. There were no lamps bright enough to project something like that. She began to drift farther ahead of me, and that's when I noticed something else. Far off in the distance at the end of the street was another soft glow, a thin bright cloud, the same silvery tone as her halo. She seemed to be heading straight toward it. By the time I reached the corner, she was almost there. I paused for a second to watch. Then I heard a car engine behind me, a delivery truck. Instinctively stepped aside, and the headlights washed over me for a second. And when I looked back up, the sky was empty. No mist, no light, no sign of her at all. Just stars again. And that was over 20 years ago. Never seen anything like it since, and sometimes I think about asking a priest or a scientist. Really, anybody who might offer an explanation. Other times I just let it stay whatever it was, a strange, beautiful, quiet thing that passed by. I don't think it was a guardian angel. I don't think it meant anything about faith or destiny. I think I was just there at that one moment when something or someone was moving on, and somehow I got to see it. The Hallway Shadow. I lost her home last month when a freak tornado ripped through town. Thankfully, my husband's late uncle's house was sitting empty. A sad blessing, really. His wife passed years ago, and he himself died suddenly this past spring. Still, I didn't hesitate. I'd never believed in ghosts or anything like that. So we packed up what was left of our lives and moved in. Me, my husband, our kids, my mom. A few days later, Mom left to visit my brother for a bit, and my husband had to travel for work, so it was just me and the kids. I work night shifts, so I usually sleep through the day, and the kids do too when school's out. They stay up late like little gremlins. 2 days ago, around 2:30 in the afternoon, I woke up feeling off, and my Akita Luna was growling. That caught me right away. She's never barked or growled before. Not once in her life. I leaned over the edge of my bed and looked down the hall. And from there, I can see all the way through the hallway and dining room and into the living room. And that's when I saw it. Something solid, not misty or see-through, but there. Moved across the living room entrance and blocked out the light. My first thought was an intruder. Except this person was enormous. At least 7 feet tall. That made my heart drop. Grabbed my gun and ran out there, and the figure had gone toward the corner where a Christmas tree stands. But when I got there, no one was there, and I checked the kids. All three were asleep with the door closed. My bird cage was rattling from the bird's panic. The Luna's hackles were raised, and I was shaking so hard I could barely even breathe. There's no way somebody had left. I had the hallway in full view the entire time. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed staring down that hall, waiting for something or anything to happen. Then about 30 seconds later, the light in my closet and the TV flickered, just a quick flash. I told myself I was imagining it. Then, 10 seconds later, the power flickered 4 times in a row. But here's the thing. When the TV came back on, YouTube was still playing. And normally if the power cuts, the Roku resets, but not this time. Thought about grabbing the kids and running outside barefoot, but I couldn't leave them asleep in there. I sat in the dark for hours shaking instead, covering the mirrors because every reflection made my heart race. It's been quiet since then, but I can't stop staring down that hallway. Keep telling myself there's no such thing as ghosts, but I know what I saw. It wasn't a shadow, and it wasn't in my imagination either. It looked like a person, tall, dressed, and solid. My husband and the girls are leaving for their New Year's trip soon. I'm supposed to stay here with my 10-year-old, but right now I don't know if I can. I used to wish I'd see something paranormal just once for proof, and now I wish I never had. The Stranger in the Rain. When I was around 10, sometime in the early 90s, back when a bike was basically your best friend and your only ride to adventure, I used that thing to go everywhere. One Saturday started off perfectly. Blue sky, warm air, no reason to stay indoors. I was a block down at my buddy's place, cozy little house not far from my mom's 70-year-old bungalow. My friend wanted me to sleep over, and none of her single moms were home yet. They both worked late shifts on weekends. So it was just us, free to do whatever until nightfall. I told her I'd ride back to my place before it got dark to grab some board games. The weather had started to change fast. Wind picked up and clouds rolled in, and a few drops of rain made me pedal harder. When I reached home, everything seemed normal, although the house felt strangely quiet. The back door was unlocked as always. Latchkey kids like me always had one door we could sneak in through. So I left my bike in the front lawn and I slipped in the back. Inside, something felt wrong. It wasn't anything I could point to, just that odd, heavy stillness, I guess. My stomach was getting tight for no reason. I brushed it off, grabbed a couple of games from my room, and went to the front of the house to call my friend and ask which one she wanted. While we talked, the rain started hammering down. Then came a thunderclap so loud it shook the windows. Right after that, the back door slammed open. It was an old solid wood door, one that never ever flew open like that. I froze. My friend heard it through the phone and asked what happened. I laughed nervously and said it was probably the wind, promising I'd shut it when I left. A few seconds later, as I was about to hang up and head out, I heard it. I heard footsteps, heavy, slow, and deliberately. They were coming from the back of the house. My friend freaked out and screamed, "Get out now!" And I didn't hesitate. I bolted and left the front door wide open, yanked my bike into the street, and tore down the center of the road as fast as I could. And by the time I reached my friend's house, her mom was already on the phone with the police. Within minutes, the patrol cars were coming, lights flashing, officers going with guns drawn. My mom arrived right in the middle of it, terrified, and they didn't find anyone inside, by the way. But what they did find were muddy footprints, large men's shoes starting from the back door, trailing through the kitchen and dining room, and across 2 other rooms, too, and stopping abruptly where the carpet began near the living room. None of the shoes in her house matched that size, and matched. Their backyards didn't even have mud, just trimmed grass and clean concrete. And no one ever figured it out. I'll never forget standing there late that night, looking at those prints as they faded into the carpet, and realizing whoever it was had stopped just a few steps away from where I'd been standing. The Man in Apartment 3. Last summer, I finally moved out with my boyfriend into our first apartment together. It was in a part of town called Maple District. It's where everybody said there was a little bit sketchy kind of a place there, but it was manageable if you kept to yourself. So we found this place online for $6.75 a month. Steal around here. The unit we wanted got taken, but the landlord told us he had another in a small 4-unit building nearby. Same price, same layout, except the last tenant had died there. I shrugged it off because people die everywhere. And when we went to see it, it didn't feel strange. The walls were a soft beige, and the place even came with the washer and dryer. Rare for the price. It was close to my campus, and the rent was too good to pass up, so we took it. The man who had died was named Harold. He'd passed not long before, just a few weeks earlier from a heart attack. The landlord said he'd died in the apartment, but his brother later told me he actually died in the hospital. Unlike another tenant from years before who had died there, in the exact same unit. And that part nobody liked to talk about. The only thing that bugged me was when we first moved in, it was like the carpet, it was ancient. And there was like more than one faded stain that looked unsettling, like, well, somebody had fallen there and never gotten up kind. Tried scrubbing it out and nothing worked, and we just covered it with a rug and pretended it wasn't there. The apartment itself was fine, old but livable, and still, sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with that prickly feeling. I'd sense something in the corners or feel eyes on me when I showered. My boyfriend brushed it off, and he doesn't believe in ghosts, which I think is just his way of not dealing with them. Our neighbor in unit number 1, though, was the opposite. Paranoid and unpleasant. She once accused us of banging on the walls at night, even though we weren't home that evening. I told her that, but she just glared like she didn't believe me. The walls were thick, and we barely heard our neighbors. Not even the family of 4 in unit 2. They were nice enough. Never learned their names, but they gave us our kitten Biscuit. That was when their cat had a litter. Things got weirder when the people in Unit 4 moved out. And while it was being renovated, police showed up one night around midnight. They asked if we'd seen anyone in the window of that unit. No, we hadn't. The place was locked up tight with no curtains and nothing inside but tools. They said somebody had reported seeing a figure standing there, a shadow maybe. Cops couldn't explain it. Over the months, little things started happening, and items would vanish and show up days later in the kitchen or on the floor. My boyfriend swore he never touched them, and honestly, he's not the type to move things around. Sometimes I'd feel someone right behind me, close enough to feel the air shift. Biscuit would hiss at empty corners or stare frozen like they're tracking something I couldn't see. Classic ghost stuff, right? Except it didn't feel like a story, it felt personal. By the end of her lease, the black mold was getting bad, and the constant unease wasn't helping. I moved back in with my parents, and I still joke about old Harold checking in, but deep down I think it was something else. Maybe the man before him, the one who really did die there. I dream about spirits sometimes, and people I've loved and lost, and I once dreamed of Harold. We were in a living room like mine, surrounded by old photographs. He was rocking in a chair, smiling faintly, and I don't remember what he talked about. Other nights I dream of my cousin who passed, and he always hugs me and says hi, and always tells him that I should be here. He just smiles and says, I know. And that's somehow the part that gets me the most. The woman in the kitchen. When I was around 15, I had something happen that still makes my skin crawl. It was a normal afternoon. I'd just gotten home from school and grabbed a sandwich, scrolling on my phone in the kitchen. My older brother came in right after, tossed his backpack down, and started making instant noodles. We were both half talking, half eating when Mom walked in. She smiled, kissed him on the cheek, which was already weird because he always dodged that kind of stuff. Walked down the hallway into her room. Nothing about it struck me as strange until about a minute later when my phone rang and it was Mom. She asked, "Hey, what do you want to do for dinner?" I laughed. "Why are you calling me? You're literally in your room." She went quiet for a second, "Because I'm at Costco, honey." I froze and I remember saying, "Wait, you're where?" When I turned to my brother, I said, "Who just kissed you on the cheek?" He just stared back at me like I'd lost my mind. For a whole year, I tried convincing myself I'd imagined it. My brother said I was just tired or something, but then about a year later, our youngest brother, who was about 9 then, came to me and looked freaked out. He said, "I believe you now." "Believe me about what?" "The mom ghost." He told me he'd been sitting at the family computer, which is right outside the kitchen. Saw Mom at the sink washing dishes, and he called out, "Mom, what's for dinner?" No response, and he asked again, and there was nothing. She turned off the water, walked straight into her room, and closed the door, and he followed her in, and the room was empty. There was no one, and he remembered Mom had gone to the store. That was when he said all the blood drained from his face. The last time it happened to me was another year later. Mom had just pulled into the driveway, talking on her phone, car trunk open with groceries. Then went outside to help and then ran back in to put the first batch on the table. When I looked up, she was standing right in front of me. Same clothes, same hair, same voice, same everything. She even talked to me about something random, totally casual. I was half listening while wondering how she'd gotten inside so fast. Then I went back outside for the rest of the groceries, and there was Mom, still on the phone by the car. I didn't even look back into the house. I told her, "You have a twin in there," and she just talked to me. She laughed nervously, but we both knew something was off. And after that, the other Mom never came back. Later I read somewhere in the Book of Enoch that only the spirits of the Nephilim wander the earth. And everyone else's souls are held elsewhere, and maybe that's true, and maybe that's who she was. So yeah, if your dead Uncle Jack ever shows up one day, it's probably not Uncle Jack. It's something that he wants you to think it is. The Whispers in the Tarkeen. This is the story of something that happened to me deep in the Tarkeen rainforest, or perhaps Tarkine, I don't know. It's in northwest Tasmania, and I was about 15. It left no scars, no bruises, but the memories followed me like a shadow ever since. I grew up in a family obsessed with nature, and my mom was an environmental researcher. My father worked for parks and wildlife, and our family vacations were really just field trips in disguise. We'd camp in places most tourists couldn't pronounce, and I didn't complain because I loved the woods back then, loved them. Past tense. And that's because after this, I never set foot there again. We lived near Waratah, just a short drive from Savage River National Park. My parents allowed me to camp solo only near Philosopher Falls, and only with my Labrador, Rusty. They'd been trained as a rescue dog. And to me, those weekends alone felt like freedom itself. Me, the tent, the rain, and Rusty snoring by the fire. But as I got older, I wanted more distance, more danger, more proof that I wasn't just a kid tagging along on my parents' expeditions, and I begged them to let me take the dirt bike out deeper into the forest. They refused, of course, so one weekend I lied. Told them I was going camping by the falls with a few school friends. Instead, I packed my tent, some food, and rode off alone into the heart of the Tarkeen. I left right after sunrise, chasing the thrill of doing something forbidden. By early afternoon, I'd found a quiet clearing near a stream and set up camp. After eating, I decided to wander just to see what's out there. I'd heard there were limestone caves somewhere close by. The forest plays tricks on you. After 20 minutes, I realized the trail behind me had vanished, and I tried not to panic. I had a compass. I had daylight. South meant the road, and the road meant home. It was easy. Only it wasn't. Not this time. The light faded faster than I'd expected, and the trees swallowed the sky. Air turned unnervingly still. And when I say still, I mean nothing. No wind, no insects, not even Rusty's collar jingling. He was rigid, ears back, staring into the trees, and then the sound came, a snap and a branch breaking. Then another, and then from somewhere above a voice. "Hey, over there." It sounded almost casual and human, and I almost felt relief. I called back, "Hey, I'm lost, where are you?" No answer, just another voice, same tone, same words, but from behind me. Rusty growled deep and low. And that's when I realized the voices weren't coming from the ground, they were up in the canopy. I ran, I didn't even think, just grabbed the compass and bolted through ferns and mud until my lungs burned. When I finally stopped, I checked the direction, tried to calm down, and it came again, and this time right next to my ear. "Hey, over here." I turned, nothing, no one. And I don't remember the next few minutes clearly. I just remember running and branches whipping my face and Rusty barking wildly until the trees opened up and I stumbled onto a logging road sobbing. The last thing I heard before I broke out of the forest was laughter. 3 voices at once, cold and overlapping. My parents picked me up that night. They were furious about the lie. I didn't care. I cried the whole way home. Dad retrieved my bike the next day and said everything at the campsite looked untouched, and I'd never been back. If anyone's ever heard voices like that in Tarkine or anywhere, I'd really like to know, because it took away something I used to love. The Night of Whispering Walls. This is one night I can never forget. Even now remembering it freaks me out. I was about 20 years old when it happened. Our university had arranged a cultural trip through the northern mountains of India, wild and misty, freezing cold. The journey was endless and roads curling like snakes through the fog. By the time dusk fell, we were still winding our way toward a small town near the old monasteries we planned to visit the next morning. Around 10:30 p.m., our bus sputtered and died right in the middle of nowhere. The driver called for help, and after an hour of waiting in that cold stillness, a friend just showed up and took us to a large hotel nearby. Strangely, it was huge for such a deserted place. The strangest part is that we were the only guests, 30 of us, all alone in this cavernous building echoing from its own footsteps. After we checked in, some students began drinking in the lobby, and I stayed upstairs with 2 of my close friends. They're both quiet girls like me. We're talking about home when a piercing scream shot through the hallway. There was a girl from the next room, and hysterical and trembling. She swore she saw something standing behind her curtain watching her. When she looked directly, the figure vanished. Everyone brushed it off, thinking it was just her being scared or drunk. But not long after, the hotel staff started acting odd, and they switched off the corridor lights and told everyone to lock their doors and stay inside. The air felt suddenly heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. Later, while my friend chatted softly, I just drifted off. I woke up to one of them shaking me, white as a sheet, and her voice quivered as she said she'd heard me calling her name, laughing and teasing. It wasn't coming from me. My eyes were closed the entire time, and the voice had echoed around the room as if the walls were speaking. When our third friend came out of the bathroom, she felt it too. Temperature had dropped, and the heater was humming, but useless. We could see our own breath, and something invisible had entered the room with us. By midnight, 9 of us had gathered together in one room to feel less alone. Sleep never came. Around 2 a.m., my friend nudged me awake again and said, "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling us. And then laughter, soft, childish, but wrong. Everyone stirred, too scared to move, and even our most skeptical classmates sat upright, frozen. The giggling grew louder and closer, and the air began to swirl, pressing on our chests. Then we all saw a dark, shapeless mass crouched in the far corner. It pulsed slightly as if breathing, and one of my friends cried out, "Please, whoever you are, leave us alone." And at once the air exploded into a roar and then silence, and For a heartbeat, it was utterly still. Then came the laughter again, and this time clear and shrill, like a child mocking us. We scrambled for the lights, and the moment the switch flicked, everything was gone. The air warmed, the black shadow vanished, and the laughter dissolved into the hum of the heater. The next morning, no one looked rested. Every group had their own version, like whispers and shapes and voices. None of us slept that night, and to this day I can only talk about it when the sun is shining. Shadows by the River House. When I was about 14, I spent a weekend at a friend's family cabin near the Maple River. It's somewhere deep in northern Ontario, a place I'd later learn was once a gathering ground for the Cree people. On our second night, we decided not to sleep in the main cabin, but in a tiny storage hut closer to the riverbank. Really, just 4 wooden walls with 2 bunks and the smell of old fishing gear. I took the top bunk, and he took the lower one across the room. I woke sometime later at midnight because it was strangely warm. Late autumn nights, they were supposed to be like things that bit through blankets, but instead the air was soft and still. A faint glow rippled across the wall beside me, and in that half-dreaming state I could see shapes moving. The silhouettes of small animals, maybe foxes or rabbits. They were shifting calmly along the boards, and they seemed utterly at peace and nibbling and grooming. They were flickering in and out like they were alive just beyond the wood, and it felt quiet in a way that I just can't really... Well, I can really only feel it. I can't think about it, at least not for too long. I didn't even want to move because just breath and that strange tranquil warmth. Then only as I started to truly wake did something bother me. The hut didn't have any light, no bulb, no window, no lantern left burning. Yet there were shadows, vivid and slow, crossing the wall. It was as though they had every right to be there. I sat up hesitant, trying to spot where the glow came from. There wasn't a single visible source, just that flickering calm, and the gentle presence of something unseen. Thinking maybe I was dreaming, I nudged my friend awake. He blinked up confused and then panicked when he realized we could see each other perfectly, despite that total darkness. I told him to look at the wall, and he did, and then he screamed and bolted out the door barefoot and sprinted to the main cabin. I stayed, and I don't know why. Maybe because the fear hadn't reached me yet, or because the peace of that moment felt scarred in some way. Like breaking would be wrong, but eventually I followed. Back at the cabin, his father, a deeply religious man, scolded us harshly for inviting nonsense with our stories. He made us pray before bed, and years later when I ran into the same friend online, we talked about it again. He remembered everything. Said it was the reason that he'd turned to study Druidic practices, and he'd always felt something ancient was watching us. So we compared notes, written down separately. Every detail matched exactly. The Woman from the Spare Room. This happened when I was 9, and my cousin was 8 back then. We were best friends back then, and we were having a sleepover at my apartment. And at that time, I lived with my mom on the 5th floor of an old building. My aunt had recently moved to another city, so her old room was empty and was supposed to become mine soon. I still slept with my mom, though. I was terrified of sleeping alone. That night, my cousin and I were playing board games and watching cartoons. Around 10:30, my mom said that we could stay up for just a little bit longer. She went to bed and told us not to open the spare room because the key was still inside and the handle was loose. We promised we wouldn't. I don't remember exactly what time it was when it happened, but we both heard footsteps from the hallway. And then we saw a tall woman with long dark hair weaving a white nightgown. Her face was pale, her lips were bright red like she just put on lipstick. She smiled at us and asked what we were playing. At first, we thought she was like one of Mom's friends who'd come over earlier and stayed late. She sat down beside us and started talking in funny voices, pretending to be like the toys. Well, we laughed even though something about her voice felt strange, like she was trying too hard to sound happy. And after a while, she said, "I need to go now. Can you open the spare room door for me?" And we both froze, and I told her that we couldn't because Mom said not to. My cousin whispered, "She kind of looks like Auntie Lynn." I was about to agree just like that, but she was gone. We thought maybe she'd gone into the spare room, so we pushed the door a little, and it made a loud creak. My mom came running out, half asleep and angry, and she told us that it was nearly 2 a.m. Made us go to bed anyway. In the morning, we told her what happened. She looked confused and said nobody had been there, and the door was still locked, and we must have been dreaming. I noticed the top latch was open, even though I remembered hearing her lock both earlier, and she said maybe she'd forgotten. I don't think she had. The night we played alone. When I was 14, one cousin and I thought it'd be fun to try the one-man tag challenge. You're supposed to fill a doll with rice, mix in a piece of your hair or nail. Yuck. Dunk it in salt water and say a few creepy lines so it comes alive. Use a little plush rabbit I had from childhood, white with floppy ears and one missing eye. We did everything exactly like the online guide said, and nothing happened. So, like an idiot, I tossed in the laundry basket and said, "Guess ghosts are busy tonight." We laughed, watched some horror movie, and eventually fell asleep on the couch, and then morning came. My cousin went to grab a hoodie from the hall closet. He froze mid-step. Rabbit was sitting inside the closet, perched neatly on a shelf facing him. We just stared at each other, and he swore he hadn't moved it, and I thought he was joking. He thought I was. Classic horror movie stuff, right? We tried to ignore it and started playing Call of Duty like nothing happened. And after an hour, I got curious and went to check the basket. The rabbit was not there. I found it instead on the windowsill in the living room with the ears drooping, staring out at the glass, and my throat went dry. I yelled for my cousin, and when he came, it was suddenly turned toward us. We both bolted. No one else was home. His mom was working a night shift, and the front door was locked. We went to full panic mode, searching every room, and found a rabbit back in the sink, wet, just like when we first soaked it. I got the brilliant idea to sprinkle flour on the floor and see if it left prints. We sat in the living room, both clutching controllers like they were weapons. A few minutes later, we saw little wet spots leading out from the kitchen across the flour up on the side of the fridge. The rabbit was up there just sitting like it owned the place. We Googled how to end the ritual, and it turns out you're supposed to spit salt water on the doll and say your name 3 times. Paranormal M, Paranormal M. Well, the narrator for Paranormal M. So we did it, and it didn't help, and next time we checked, and it was sitting under the TV. At that point, we were done, and we buried it behind the shed in a flower pot, poured salt all over it, and went back. The last light in the theater. I was in the theater alone one night. Part of my high school's drama club, so technically I wasn't supposed to be there by myself, but my directors never really cared, and the only 2 other people around were working in another room way down the hall. That room's metal doors were so thick and heavy, and once they were shut, sound barely passed through them. They were definitely shut that night. I was on stage packing up after rehearsal, and the place was completely dark, and the stage lights were off, and the house lights too. I didn't bother with the work lights since I only planned to be there in a minute, and my phone's flashlight cut through the black just enough for me to see the floor. As I gathered my things, and I heard footsteps, they came from the far side of the stage. I swung my light over, expecting to catch one of my friends trying to scare me. No one. The sound stopped the instant my light hit that spot. Weird, but I brushed it off, because, probably somebody walking down the hallway, or the old wood or something. The stage was ancient, and every board had a ghost of its own. so I was nearly done when something rattled above me. It was on the catwalk. I aimed my light upward and there was nothing, and my heart was pounding a little bit faster. But I muttered something about rats and horror videos and went back to zipping my bag. When I finally stood up to leave, I turned my flashlight toward the main doors and froze. For a split second, I saw it. A tall, dark figure hunched over. No face, no details, just an outline darker than the dark around it. The beam of my phone trembled as I walked toward that door. I told myself I was imagining things and they were just shadows or nerves. But the moment I reached for the handle, the shop lights just behind the stage flickered on. And they were motion activated. They only turned on if somebody walked deep into the workshop, way past where I'd been. I didn't wait to find out who or what had triggered them. Maybe a janitor, though nobody ever cleaned that area. Maybe something else. Grabbed my bag, ran down the hall, and burst into the black box theater where my friends were. Gave a quick shaky goodnight and get out of there. It wasn't until I was halfway done that I realized something else. The motion sensor lights in the hallway never turned on as I left.
Greetings, fellow truth seekers. Join us at Paranormal M as we uncover stories that challenge the limits of human understanding. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay connected with our explorations. I vividly remember stepping outside of my own body as a child. This is my earliest childhood memory. I do not know the exact age I was, but it's one of the few memories that I'm able to recall from my childhood as early as I possibly can. I remember waking up next to myself in my bed. It had felt like I was in complete and total control of my body, totally aware and conscious. I recall being extremely confused and worried about what was happening, and stepping out of my bed. I'm unsure of what my motive was, but I like to assume it was probably to go and wake my mom up out of concern. Now, this is the part that's never left me. I feel as if I can put myself back into the situation and see it just as clear as I did when I was a child. As I went toward my door, I turned back to see a tin garbage bin at the end of my bed. The lid started to move, and it illuminated. A fiery orange figure started to crawl out of it. It looked like it was made out of magma, or a personified fire. I remember screaming, but there was no sound to it, which scared me even more. I ran out of my room and down my stairs. When I looked out of these windows that surrounded the front door in my old house, I saw what looked like an animal, more specifically a dog. It was completely white and had yellow eyes. It was staring back at me through the glass. I completely remember how I reacted to this, with genuine panic and fear. I ran back up the stairs. I felt like crying, but I couldn't. I was only able to hear my own thoughts, and was unable to make noises. The environment around me, my house, was, however, just very vocal. I recall the noises of my stairs and the sound of what a garbage made out of tin would actually sound like shuffling around constantly. The ending makes no sense at all to me. I was at the end of the hallway facing my room after running back up the stairs, and I saw this garbage monster thing struggling to leave my room. Everything was almost completely dark around it, and I swear it's like I can relive seeing how the monster itself illuminated the furniture that it was close to, just like how a fire or a flame would in a dark room. I clearly remember hearing, "It's not real." This was the voice of my mother who was asleep. When this happened, a dream catcher that I had hanging in the corner of my room began to consume everything around me. My memory of this part isn't as clear as the rest of this dream experience, but I remember there being light, with the center focus being this dream catcher. I'm unsure of what happened at the end of all this. I don't remember waking up or anything at all related to the event from that point forward. The only thing I can recall after this feeling is just knowing that it wasn't actually real, and that it was in fact a dream. From what I believe, I'm confident that this was some sort of, an out-of-body experience or a lucid dream. However, I also firmly believe that this was the first experience I ever had with the feeling of raw, genuine terror. There's never been a time I can recall with such feelings of intense fear, other than this instant from whatever age I was when this occurred. I'm now 21 years old and have absolutely never encountered the feeling of fear like that. But some other times where my life was actually in danger, I did, but nothing has ever felt as intense as it did in this dream. I think that's why it's never left my memory. Am I being haunted? Somebody please help me. I can't do this anymore. Just now, I completely saw a man in my living room. I was crying in my room because of something going on in my life, and I went downstairs to get water. I felt like somebody else was in the living room, like another person was there with me. My initial thought was my dad, because he usually wakes up at absurd times because of his sleep apnea. I walked into the room and saw somebody staring at me. I thought it was my dad at first, but when I focused a little harder in the dark, it was not. I blinked and he wasn't there anymore. I got so sick to my stomach and literally just ran away. I ran into my room and I can't stop shaking. I'm so afraid of just what it was that happened. This isn't even the first time that this has happened. A few months ago, while I was alone at home for a week, I thought somebody broke in. From my room upstairs, I heard my dog barking. I thought he needed to go outside, and when I went to let him out of the corner of my eye, I saw and heard a kitchen chair move. My dog started to scream, bark at it, totally freaking out, while I was standing there in this state of frozen shock. Both TVs turned on at the same time. I freaked out and made a sprint for my keys on the table, got in my car and called my parents sobbing. I wanted them to check the cameras before I dialed 911, and they told me they saw nothing on them. They thought I was being dramatic, and do not believe the full extent of my explanation that this chair had moved out from the table by itself. Aside from that, and what just happened not even an hour ago to me, a smaller thing happened to me too. A light in my room that has never once flickered started rapidly flickering, turned off, then back on again a few days ago. A door slammed in my face by itself not too long ago. Things are always being misplaced, lost, or randomly turning up after not being able to find it for a long time. Sometimes I think I see something move or someone out of the corner of my eye. I get these random feelings that someone is looking at me, or in the room with me when I'm alone, usually accompanied by full-body chills and goosebumps. At times I've heard fully audible words. The night terrors are so unbearable to the point of where I avoid going to sleep. Waking up screaming is a common thing for me, and my parents have to run into my room to wake me up countless times. These are all recent, occurring within the past 6 months. But I'm told by my parents that I used to talk to my dead grandfather, who I never met as a young kid. I was too young, for me to have any current memories of him today. They say that I used to say I have a friend who quote-unquote brings me flowers and looks like Dad. Apparently, when they showed me his license, I got really excited and told them that he looked like that. Another thing I happen to actually remember is seeing something in church when I was a kid. During a service, I had seen a thick golden blanket kind of a thing pass through the aisle. When I saw it, I remember turning to my dad and saying, "Dad, I just saw God." And he laughed and said, "No, you didn't." Ironically enough, I grew up to an abandoned Catholic faith. I wouldn't call myself agnostic, atheist, or a skeptic, but I do always try to think of a logical explanation for things. I just feel like I'm going crazy. I'm so done with being afraid and feeling this way, and I have no idea where to turn. I'm begging for someone here to help me understand what's going on. Footsteps and missing items. Recently, we bought a home that was built a few years ago, and it's 2 stories. We're the second occupants. The original owners divorced and sold it to us. At least, that's what we were told. Nearly every day when I'm in the office, I can hear loud, and I mean loud, footsteps on the 2nd floor. My son's room is directly above my office, and that is generally where we hear these footsteps. Though randomly we hear footsteps upstairs in other sections, like when we're in the kitchen or in the living room. Every time it freaks me and my wife out and I run upstairs to see what's going on, but there is never anyone upstairs. I've even explored all of our attic spaces multiple times just to see if we had a squatter. There's no evidence anyone is secretly living in the attic. I've checked more times than I'd care to admit. I thought it was our son when he was taking naps, maybe running around. However, he's a young toddler still in bed that he really can't get out of. I've tested him, and it, multiple times. He sleeps with a full sleep cover, so if he could get out of that bed, it's completely covered. And any time that he's up there, I run up to catch him, but he's always still asleep. We have old school baby monitors, and they too pick up the footsteps. Now, if this were not crazy enough, since we moved in, multiple items have come up missing or moved. For example, we finished up a wine bottle one night, and when we woke up in the morning, it was gone. And when I say gone, I mean we checked every inch inside, outside, and all the trash containers. It was gone. Randomly, items will come up missing and show up in places that we would never put them. Some of this is really likely attributable to our toddler, but most of the time, items disappear and reappear in places that he physically could not reach. We're at a loss. Maybe we're haunted. Maybe we live at a nexus point. Either way, we're looking to sell soon because living in the Twilight Zone is annoying. We cross-posted this with the glitch in the Matrix because we're just at a loss at what the hell is going on. Extremely haunted donut shop. To start off, I work at a donut shop that's open literally 24 hours a day. Everyone wonders why we're open so late, but homies need their donuts, so it is what it is. I'm lucky enough to work late night shifts, which I guess is prime time for paranormal activity. When I first got hired, I was pretty indifferent to the ideas of ghosts, spirits, demons. I'm a college student, so I have a lot more important things on my mind, like drowning my ass in debt or just having a good time. Right after I got hired, one of my friends who convinced me to get the job asked me what position I got hired for. When he found out it was for the late night shifts, my guy busts up laughing and says, "Good luck, bro. Hope you know how to catch flying donut boxes." He's usually a bit of a clown, so I really didn't think anything of it. The first experience I had came on my first night. I was being trained on how to ring up orders correctly and navigate the menu system. It was around 2 a.m. at this point, and I really wasn't too busy, so my trainer felt like he could leave me on my own for a bit, and to call him over if I ran into any trouble. I pulled out my phone and started to run my playlist, when all of a sudden, I felt a cold finger tap me just under my shoulder. This made me freak the hell out immediately for one reason. My back was to the glass used to separate the customers from the register, COVID, which means nobody could be standing there. I immediately turned around only to see nobody there, and I called over my trainer to explain what just happened. He just nodded and smiled before saying, "Yep, welcome to the job, kid. Surprised it took this long for something to happen, honestly." The rest of my night was a tale of donut boxes constantly being thrown from shelves, lights turned on and off, my phone battery draining from 70 to 5 in about 5 minutes, you name it. One of my most frightening experiences to date, though, involved me actually seeing something. One of my duties at my job is to check the bathrooms to make sure that they're clean and everything is in order. One of the nights I had to do this, my manager was with me. We began wiping down the sink when all of a sudden the door swung open. We both turned to look at the doorway and a huge guy walks in. He was probably close to 6'5" or 6'6" with a beard that would give Gandalf a run for his money. When he walked a little bit closer, the room just filled with the stench of rotten, sour ass. It smelled like someone went to Chipotle, ordered everything on the menu, and decided to unleash the depths of hell on our walls. This guy looked at me and asks if the bathroom is open to use. Me, assuming the man needed to unleash the contents of his pants, grabbed my things and walked out with my manager to let him do his thing. We both waited right outside the bathroom door for about 5 minutes before my manager suggested that we go check on him. When we walked back in, it was completely silent and the stall door was closed. My manager and I just looked at each other in confusion and decided to knock on the stall door. No answer. I pushed it a little bit and it was unlocked. Nobody was there. This guy was nowhere to be found, and there's only one exit out of this bathroom. I can say for absolute certainty that he did not walk out of that bathroom. Obviously, there have been so many more experiences that have occurred, not only to me, but everyone who works there as well. I will say, though, it's a lot more fun to be sort of a veteran of this place, watching the new hires get freaked out at the voices, flying donut boxes, and physical touches. Because now I've been through it all, and I've seen it all. What happens when a loved one dies? This happens in Mexico. Me and my family are from a small town at the outskirts of one of the biggest cities in the country. And that has become semi-urbanized since last century. So people here still have strong folklore about the supernatural things in comparison with the rest of the city. So the paranormal stuff is seen here as something more accepted between the people. To the story. It happened at the beginning of last year, when the second wave of COVID really hit the country, making almost all of the hospitals get overwhelmed. One of my uncles works as a nurse in the hospital, so unfortunately he caught the virus and ended up infecting his family and parents, as well as my grandparents, even before presenting symptoms. His father and my grandfather were brothers, and all of the 3 houses are next to each other. The problem started when my grandpa and his brother started to get worse after they presented symptoms. So, my parents decided to take my grandparents to our home in order to take care of them. Fortunately, my grandma didn't present even symptoms, but despite her best efforts, my grandpa was not getting better. Taking him to a hospital would have been a death sentence due to being overwhelmed, as I mentioned before, due to him being already dependent of oxygen tanks because of the virus. So, transporting him was really difficult and a risk for his health. And even if he would have been accepted, the personnel inside of hospitals weren't enough. We had more family members working inside hospitals, so we knew what was really going on inside of them. After 2 weeks and all of our efforts, he did not make it. So as you can imagine, it took a really big toll on us all. As for the brother of my grandpa, he ended up dying as well, both of them being at their 80s. Now, one of the usual things believed here is that when somebody dies, the person stays around for a few days. I've never been someone who believes every story about paranormal stuff. I try to judge things from a more rational side, despite experiencing some things that still make me wonder about what we can really assure about what we know about paranormal things in general. This was my first experience with the belief that I mentioned. The brother of my grandpa died a few days before him. The weird thing started the very same day that his brother died. It started when I was in another room of my house, as I was getting ready for something to eat. So I was not in the same room as my grandpa when all of a sudden I saw a shadow for a brief moment exiting the kitchen. But I really thought it was my imagination due to the fatigue. My parents and I took turns taking care of Grandpa, so he never was unattended, even at night being my turn when this happened. So I ignored it. But after I heard a voice of Grandpa's brother coming from the same room Grandpa was, and I have no doubt about that one. It was clearly him. Obviously, I freaked out because it wasn't possible that it was him, because we were not in the same city that he lives in. He was also in a delicate condition. So I went to check on Grandpa, but there was no one there, and my other family members were not there at the moment. I gave it not that much of an importance until a few hours later when we were informed that Grandpa's brother had just died a few hours before. Even worse, after my grandpa started asking the condition of his brother any time that he could, yet not until that day. Despite not knowing he had died, being impossible because we knew that if we told him, he'd probably just get even worse in his health. So everyone just kept it a secret, even my grandma. Even till the last days, my grandpa asked about him, and we just told him that he was better. I don't know if he believed it, because he said that his brother came every now and then to visit him, and as you can imagine, that being impossible. The day came when my grandpa did not resist anymore and passed away. Just a few hours after his brother. One of the most common things that happened here is that it's said that after someone has died, some other person who doesn't know that person died sees them, like if they were making their daily lives for one last time. I didn't believe in that before all of this happened. But the news of my grandpa's death took a while to spread as we were not in the same city that we lived in. And as I said in the beginning, being from a non-completely urbanized area, people still knows almost everyone in town, especially old people. When we went back to my grandparents' house to stay with my grandma, fortunately parents took off work so still could be done at home, we found some friends of the family who were really surprised about Grandpa's passing, as they said they had seen him just a few days before, still after his passing, and even had a brief chat with him, and knowing them, I don't distrust them, as they're not the only ones who attribute everything to paranormal stuff, and also their reaction was complete shock. Maybe I believed more easily due to what I experienced with my grandfather's brother. Even for a few days after we arrived, my grandpa's rocking chair swayed at random times. I would have known if the wind or a minor earthquake were causing this because I know that house like the palm of my hand. I used to live there for a few years when I was younger. Sometimes plates would appear out of the kitchen without any logic, but we never really felt uncomfortable. I guess that's what it means when people talk about feeling their loved ones still being with them. This started to fade away slowly, and in the end, everything returned to being as normal as it could. I need help explaining something that happened while I was younger. When I was younger, about 8 or 9, I had spent the whole day at a local fair. I was showing my 4-H animals, and because that shit was itchy, I had gone to my parents' car to change it. For some reason, there was just this old man next to the car, though. I hadn't put much thought into it. This guy didn't give much explanation, but he asked me to get into his truck. I hadn't really been educated in kidnapping and stuff, like I knew it wasn't a good idea to trust strangers, so I quickly said no thank you and finished changing before running off. Skip forward several hours, and once I was done hanging out with some friends, I go back to the car for it to be gone. For context, I've never had a good relationship with my parents, and I really shouldn't be living with them with all they do to me. Of course, I was worried. I really didn't have any way to get home now but walk. But that old man was still there. He said that he knew my parents, even said their names, and said that he was going to take me home since they had forgotten me. Being a small town in Ohio, I didn't really take much for anybody to know each other, especially when your grandfather was the favorite high school teacher for forever, basically. So I really didn't question him and climbed in. It was at this time that I noticed the first weird thing besides him still being in the same spot as earlier, as if he knew it was going to happen. His face would almost change, if that makes sense, never appearing quite the same as it had only a few minutes before, yet still recognizably being him all the same. Of course, he didn't take me home, but instead to his own home. Besides the normal kidnapping crap, there was many things off about this. Where we're seemingly phasing in and out of traffic, as if we weren't entirely there. Another thing of note is that when we finally did get to our destination, at first we had just turned into a cornfield before a small path just barely large enough for the truck made itself known. It was as if we were entering something otherworldly, and that I was witnessing something that I really shouldn't have. At the point of him shutting the truck off, I had understood that I had just been kidnapped, but something about him just made me feel so calm. Like I knew that nothing could go wrong in his presence. Like no harm could possibly come to me. My time there was, for lack of a more fitting word, perfect. I had no worry of getting hurt from my parents, no stress to be as perfect as possible, no worry that every little thing I did wrong or forgot to do would get to hurt me. I got to do whatever I wanted, play games with him, or bake and help him around the house, or anything else my brain could come up with. Eventually, the time came when I realized that I really needed to go back. No matter how perfect it was, I couldn't stay here any longer, simply because I needed to get back home. Thus, I left as soon as I knew that he had fallen asleep, and just as we came in, the corn parted large enough for me to pass through while some fireflies fluttered about as if to light my path. It took me what felt like days to get back home, though it was probably only a few hours since night had broken. Or rather, since night hadn't broken. The whole time it felt as if I was pulled in two separate directions. One down what I assumed to be the proper path home, and a lighter pull to that farmhouse. I kept trudging forward, and the moment I reached home, the moment of dawn broke. The tether to the farmhouse was now gone. After managing to somehow get inside, I learned something horrifying. I had been there for 10 days, and just as suddenly as I disappeared, I had reappeared. Years later, around 11 this time, while out with friends, I noticed I was near that magical cornfield, and just kind of went over to it, expecting something to happen. But nothing did. The corn simply swayed in the wind, and even going deep enough into it that I shouldn't have found the house and there was nothing. No clearing, no beat-up old pickup, no kind old man. I want to say this was just the delusions of a scared child, and that trauma has made me misremember some or most of the details. But that doesn't feel right. Still to this day, I see him sometimes, but it's always out of the corner of my eye or passing by in the streets, only for me to turn around and either the person have a completely different appearance, or that person just wasn't there altogether. Dream hopping or dimensional travel. For years, my best friend and I have collected an array of stories from minor encounters with the paranormal to the almost horrifying. To make this story a small step into the weird will be easier to understand my best friend and I. It was a late Saturday. We were both passed out in her full-sized bed. She liked to sleep against the wall, while I liked to be free to move by the edge. I remember my dreams so vividly, like if I could fall asleep while typing this, I could be right back where we were. There were stacked rows of desks, like the classic college class auditorium. At the front was a solid light wood desk. It looked yellow in the scene, contrasted against the green Berber carpet. There was a small board with a presentation. I don't remember the exact words of the slide that well, but I do remember after I read that slide, and it was my boyfriend's turn. I clicked the next slide and turned to her, indicating her turn to present the slide. As she began reading, I awoke halfway through her sentence. But when I woke, she was lying beside me, still reading the next slide. I freaked out. How was she reading the slide? I'm awake and she's still asleep. How? I started slapping her arm, trying to wake her up. She groggily slapped me away and said, "I'm not done reading the slide yet." I was freaked out even more. I ran to the bedroom light and flicked it on. I bounded into the bed and declared that she and I were going into the kitchen to drink coffee and talk about this. She was confused at first, but while the memory was fresh, I had to ask her what she remembered. She told me the layout of the room, the desk, the carpet, the smartboard. She even pointed out that I had read the slide before hers. We both kept tossing back and forth about how there was no way. I think at the time we remembered the topic of the presentation, and she said that she had no idea why she would know that stuff. We still reminisce on that scary dream hopping. And every time we do, I always wonder if we really had transported ourselves into each other's dream or somewhere else. Worst feeling I've ever felt. This happened years ago, but I still remember that night. My bed was in the space next to my door. The hallway light was on at this point, and I wasn't comfortable sleeping in the dark, as I was still fairly young. So the room wasn't as dark to the point it was pitch black, but it was only as bright as the hallway light would go. I was sleeping on my side, back facing my room and front facing the wall. I remember being in a deep sleep, honestly a peaceful one at that. I heard whispering. I remember I couldn't understand what was being said, like they were talking in tongues or a whole different language. When I was younger, I wasn't bilingual at all, so I really couldn't have known if it was a different language. It was like it woke me up immediately. I remember my eyes being forced open by shock. Not the kind of shock where somebody throws you a surprise birthday party or something that you weren't expecting. It was that shock that makes your stomach hurt. I knew someone was at the top of me because I could see their outline. I didn't dare to move, I was so scared. At one point they stopped speaking and slowly started to move to the side of the room. My eyes were stuck to where that thing used to be, and I remember having to talk myself up trying to gain just one bit of courage to even look. I eventually did look, but as you could guess, nothing was there. I don't remember much about what happened afterwards. I just know that I eventually did fall asleep. I haven't experienced something so terrifying since then. Every time I talk about it, being reminded of that dreaded feeling. Seeing shadow people. When I was a child, I always got a weird feeling from my grandmother's house, specifically at night. It was just always so hard to sleep for some reason. One night I had a nightmare. It scared me so much I had to get out of bed to walk to my grandmother's room. My grandmother's room, however, was on the complete other side of the house. I walked down the hall past the atrium and saw my shadow on the wall. This didn't frighten me right away because I figured it maybe could just be the moonlight shining on me through the glass of the atrium reflecting a shadow. But I noticed the shadow was extremely tall. I knew shadows could look distorted, but this didn't look like my shadow. I turned around to find a 7-foot-plus tall shadow figure standing clear as day in front of me. Being a child, I reacted the only way I knew how to. I kicked it in the private area and ran away. I went to my grandmother's room and told her what had happened, and she just waved it off. Now, I would just say that this could be night terrors, but growing up, I told my siblings about it, and my sister had seen the same thing. Years had passed, and we started to get kind of too old to spend weekends at my grandmother's house. My brother lived there for a short while, and one of his previous girlfriends had seen it too. To this day, I wouldn't spend the night at her house. It's unsettling. I've even woken up to my grandmother staring at me while sleeping once while I was there. This hasn't been the only time I've seen shadow people, though. I've seen them in the reflection of my TV, in the backseat of my car, out of the corner of my eye. I choose to ignore them. To me, it's not so consistent for me to think that it's hallucinations. I've seen so many shadow people, felt presences, and just recently seen a full-body apparition. One time I felt something watching me sleep so strongly. I was paralyzed in fear because I knew it was there. I've had sleep paralysis before, and this was not it. At one point, I swore I felt my shirt riding up while sleeping. I tried to ignore it, but when I felt something touch my back, I told myself, oh, hell no, and got up. I find it strange. We see these things a lot while others don't. I do believe in ghosts and the paranormal, but it honestly scares me. I don't invite that energy. I don't want to communicate with them. I just want to be left alone. However, I can't help but be curious. I've heard shadow people are mostly negative, and that just frightens me more, because I've seen so many of them. If anyone has more info on them, I would definitely appreciate it. Did something impersonate my dad? Anyways, this happened to me when I was about 9 or 10. I was preparing to go to sleep on a weekday, and I got underneath the blankets when I heard someone walking into my room. When I was a kid, I always left my bedroom door wide open, but because of the layout of my bedroom, I can't see anything outside when I'm laying on my bed. I only realized it was my dad when he stepped into my room and stood by the doorframe. That's when I noticed something really weird about him. He had this expression on his face like he wanted to kill me, or like if I had done something terribly wrong and he was furious at me. His eyes were completely open. At first, I thought I had done something wrong, like I clogged the toilet or he had tripped on one of my toys and came to my room to scold me. But he just stood there with the most serious look on his face for about 10 seconds without saying a single word. My dad is the least serious person I know, and he's really talkative, so this unsettled me very deeply. Then I asked him, "What's going on?" And he didn't react at all. Now that I think about it, I don't think he even blinked during this whole thing. He stood there for about 4 seconds after I asked him, and then he just straight up disappeared. Like he was edited out of a video, like he logged off from an online video game. I was dumbfounded. I sat on my bed completely frozen, thinking of an explanation of what just had happened. Was I dreaming? I recall being wide awake with my bedroom lights on, not being tired at all. In fact, at that time, I couldn't fall asleep if I didn't have my blankets covering my head. And I also was playing with my PSP before I heard the footsteps. So, was he really in my room, and I just had suddenly fallen asleep? Then I woke up and he wasn't there? If so, then why did he have that terrible expression on his face? I checked the time on my PSP, and only a minute had passed since I turned its screen off. I concluded that I couldn't have had a quick memory lapse, and he actually did leave the room normally. So I quickly ran to my parents' room to see if he was either in the hall walking to his bedroom or inside of it, preparing to go to sleep, you know. To my surprise, when I entered, he was sound asleep, snoring loudly. I woke him up and his eyes were bloodshot red as they usually were when he was been sleeping for a long time. His hair was also really messy, unlike when he came into my room. I asked him in a serious tone if he had gone to my room before going to sleep. He saw that I wasn't playing around, sat on his bed and answered that the only time he had gone to my room had been at noon. I literally cannot explain what happened to me. My dad thinks it's pretty weird, and I stopped mentioning it because he's pretty scared of the paranormal, and I don't want to stress him out. I don't tell the story often since it's so ridiculous. I know nobody would believe me, but it's been bugging me for so long I just want some sort of explanation. You can't make this shit up. My 7-Eleven is haunted. So a while back, roughly around mid-November 2021, I was working night shift at my local 7-Eleven. My coworker was in the back cooking chicken, and I was out front taking care of the customers and making sure all of our write-offs were done. And then I heard this alarm telling me that the door opened and a customer had entered. I spun around to greet them, and as I did, I saw a black blur rush through the door and dart down the nearest aisle. At first, I thought it was a customer that really needed the washroom or something, but then I noticed I didn't see them pass by any other aisles leading to the washroom. So, I decided to take a quick look around the store to make sure they weren't trying to steal anything. However, I couldn't find anyone in the store. They just disappeared. Roughly 5 to 10 minutes later, a woman entered the store and walked down all the aisles, seemingly looking for someone, Then she called out their name. "Wesley." She only said it once before leaving the store. After that strange night, up until 3 days ago, things were normal. Nothing really seemed out of the ordinary, but the only incident I found being slightly strange was hearing a banging thud on the walls. This was in the kitchen one day. However, one of the bathrooms is on the other side of that wall, so I was cooking at the time, so really didn't know if we had any other customers in there at that moment, which is completely possible. There could have been countless things that they were doing. We've had extremely high people banging around the bathroom before. Teens will sometimes decide to have sex in there. Ew. Needless to say, that washroom's definitely seen some shit. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a customer. Anyways, on Thursday, January 20th, I was once again working the night shift. And while doing my end of the shift, paperwork and printing off everything I needed, I was standing in front of the window facing all the gas pumps, when for some reason pump number 1 popped up on the gas till, saying that someone clicked the request help button. But when I looked out the window, there was no one anywhere near the pumps. The entire lot was empty, except for a couple of cars belonging to other people in the area who also work night shifts in the neighboring stores. Later that same night when I went to the washroom, the door handle jiggled when I was inside. This was an employee washroom in the back. Customers don't have access to it. When I came back out, I asked my coworker if she was trying to open the door, but she was getting cookies boxed to sell to customers and never left the front of the store. A silhouette in the sky that hid the stars. This one happened to me when I was young, like elementary school age. Pretty sure like 4th or 5th grade. As I had mentioned in my previous post, there's absolutely nothing to do in this little town. At least there wasn't when I lived there. So more often than not, this led to kids being mischievous. This night was no exception. I waited until my grandparents fell asleep, and then I snuck out. Yes, 4th or 5th grade, and met my friend up the street. We really had no plans, like, what the fuck was a couple of kids gonna be doing out at night anyway? Wasn't the safest idea looking back. Anyway, I met up with my friend on his bike, and we just rode around together and teased each other, and did what typical 4th or 5th graders kinda do. Now at that time, my friend only lived a few blocks away from me, maybe 2 to 3 blocks total. Wasn't that far, and probably would have been too sketched out to go any farther at that age, honestly. So we were just riding up and down the street between his house and mine, and we both suddenly got a horrible feeling. I say both because he had to have felt what I felt at that same time. We both simultaneously stopped riding our bikes and just stared at each other for a second. I still really can't wrap my head around what happened next, but I have a few guesses. As we stood there with this horrible feeling in the air, it was almost as if the air suddenly had an electrical current. It's the best way I can explain it. All the hair on my body stood up. There was this sort of tingling feeling, I guess you could say, followed by a deep, deep primal sense of fear. As soon as this primal fear hit me and my friend, for some reason, we looked into the sky. Now, again, small town, not a lot of industrial lights. You can see the stars pretty clearly, especially on a night like this. What we saw, and the best way I can explain it, is this blacked out rectangle shape, extending for maybe a block and a half over us. It was a silhouette in the sky, and you couldn't see the stars through this thing. There was a perfect outline around it, and it definitely was a solid object. At this point, we realized that it was hovering over us. I'd say maybe a couple 100 feet in the air overhead, and was projecting a shadow over us. Now, I've experienced some scary stuff in my life, but I still don't ever remember feeling this primal amount of fear, sheer terror. My friend and I looked at each other and screamed, and I booked it out of there riding my bike as fast as my little legs could go. The weird thing is, though, is I was only a block or two from my grandparents' house. It felt like it took an eternity to finally get back there, despite my pedaling as fast as I could. Now, as an adult, 20 plus years later, I guess you could chalk it up to some sort of experimental craft that maybe we weren't supposed to see. I don't know. I can still feel that primal fear even thinking about this situation. And I still can't figure out what exactly happened that night. I watched someone get possessed when I was in middle school. Went to middle school or junior high, whatever, in a small town and community. There honestly was nothing, like absolutely nothing to do besides go to the mini mall or to the community rec center, where they would hold these teen dances and play horrible early 2000s music. Ew. Ended up going to one of these teen dances per usual with a group of friends. And per usual, said group of friends got into it with the preps or jock kids. Fight breaks out. Police are called. Everyone scatters. Me and this kid, who I'll just call Nate, end up walking back to his house on this bike path that runs along the backside of this rec center. It's nighttime, and there's a skate park to one side of us. And for a while, then nature trails, and a river on the other side. We keep walking along this path, and suddenly Nate stops and says, "Do you see that?" Pointing into the pitch blackness as he faced the direction of the nature trails and the river. Now, this kid was admittedly at times not always too nice to me, and I thought he was just messing with me at first. So I say, "See what? There's nothing there." But at this point, this fool is walking towards whatever he thinks he sees. I see him walk right up like he's approaching a person, looks back at me and just crumbles. It was like he fainted or something. So now I'm in the middle of this path completely alone, and there may or may not be some type of presence that just caused my friend to pass out. I'm scared to death at this point, obviously, and this is all becoming too much for my 13-year-old brain to handle. I'm half Hispanic, and I grew up around very religious elders, and was always told when I had nightmares or even if I felt evil that I needed to pray. I started walking towards my friend because I didn't want to leave him there, but I also didn't want to be alone, and I began praying. Now, as an adult, I am not religious, but at this time I was doing whatever I thought would help. I went to try and pick my friend up, and he was so heavy, abnormally heavy. I was big for my age, and he was much smaller than me, height and weight-wise, and it was like I was trying to pull a grown man. I know dead weight, but this felt different. He also was ice cold to the touch, despite it being in the middle of summer. I started to drag him, and was praying and focusing on this one particular star as I did so. Not really sure why, looking back, but I focused on this star and prayed repeatedly. My initial thought was to drag him to the hospital, but I swear the more I prayed, the brighter this star got, and it was like he was revived or something. He woke up annoyed that I was dragging him and scuffing his inversion, and just confused about what had happened. He said that he saw an old man near the tree line when we were walking, and that he motioned for Nate to come towards him. He said once he got close to the old man, this thing put out its freaking hand inside of Nate, which is what apparently made him pass out. I was happy he was okay, and that I wasn't alone, and we ended up walking back to his house like nothing happened. But I believe something did happen to Nate that night. Flash forward a month or so later, and per usual, I'm meeting up with my friends to once again go to one of these teen dances. Because per usual, that's the only thing going on. I get to Nate's house and the whole feeling is just off. Hard to describe, really. I go downstairs to Nate's room and he's not in there. But this is something that happened. We were good enough friends that I would just wait for him to pop in, which he would do normally. But this time, there was nothing. I go back upstairs and every single animal this dude had, which was like a cat and 2 or 3 small dogs, if I remember right, they were all standing hair raised with their backs to the front door, staring up. And I see my friend Nate sitting over this banister that he had in his house in a weird way, feet dangling. Didn't see him there when I came in, and he's just silent, scribbling and mumbling something. "What's up, man?" I asked him nervously, not really knowing what the hell was going on at this point. Nate looked up at me and looked like he hadn't slept in a few days, deep circles underneath his eyes, and he says, "I ain't fucking scared." Confused, I asked, "Scared of what, bro?" And he jumps down from the banister with the paper in his hand and gives it to me. The paper has the word death, and then just black scribbles, like he had been sitting scribbling the same circle in the same place for a long time. Instantly got all the bad vibes and nope energy, and I just flat out told him, "I'm going home, man," and opened the door, leaving his terrified animals in the corner and wondering if they'd be okay. Long story longer, Nate eventually got into a lot of trouble, dealt with some pretty crippling vices, and though he's still alive now, looks like a shell of his former self, or just not what you would have expected this kid to grow up to be, say the least. I think I witnessed a possession happen to him. Haven't told many people this story, and I don't think I've ever shared this in detail. My friend and I were hexed by a crazy guy living in an abandoned villa. I'm a 22-year-old university student. I'm male. I live in Fez, Morocco, where the university that I study in is located. A few days ago, I was at a public cafe studying for exams. And as I was leaving for home, I ran into my friend. Spelled Mehdi. The narrator's going to go with Mehdi. After the usual, "Hey, how are ya?" he told me something weird had happened to him. As he was walking to the cafe to meet me, he passed by an old abandoned villa situated on a small street behind the cafe. The villa is old and is surrounded by a 1.5 meter long wall that is further supported by a 2 meter long steel fence on top of it. The villa itself can only be viewed partly, mostly because of the vegetation behind the fence, old trees, untrimmed plants, and usual horror story stuff. As he was walking past the villa, my friend was called by a weird, creepy guy from behind the fence. When he approached the guy, he gave him a piece of candy rolled inside of a piece of paper, as well as another piece of paper folded neatly and covered entirely by Scotch tape. My friend thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it. As he continued to walk, he unwrapped the piece of candy, just to check if it was actual candy, threw it away. Then he moved to the scotched-up piece of paper. After struggling with the tape for a bit, he managed to open and unfold it. He was surprised by a weird assortment of letters, symbols, and hard-to-decipher words in Arabic. In my culture, these things are taken very seriously, and the majority of Moroccans believe this stuff is real and works. So my friend, who studies Islamic jurisprudence, was very surprised to know what it was. A hijab, not to be confused with a hijab. They're both spelled the same way. It's a sort of magic charm that veils its users from harm and protects them from evil spirits. And in some occasions, it could also work as a bringer of love, appreciation, and service from other people. When my friend told me the story, I was instantly intrigued. For all my life, I've been curious about these things. Although I do not believe in them and still don't to this day, I wanted to see if the spell would work. I took the piece of paper from him, gave it a quick scan to see what it was all about, gave it back to my friend telling him to keep it until we go back home and in fact see what it's about. When we did get back home, we opened it again and read it another time more closely together. The wording of it is quite weird and hard to decipher, not to mention it has some weird symbols. One in the shape of a cross, and the others in the shape of an Othala, and the other two are in a shape that I couldn't decipher, but they looked like unequal signs, only with 3 horizontal lines in the middle. I have the picture of the spell on my phone, and I'll post it here as soon as I figure out how to do that. Upon closer inspection, the words that we could manage to decipher translate to something like, "O God, I have sacrificed this unborn child for you to bring your servants. O most great one, to bring unto him acceptance, love, and victory." The servants referred to here are the jinn, to whom whoever made this spell wished to appoint the job of bringing the man who gave it to my friend good luck and fortune. When Mehdi read that, he interpreted the supposed sacrifice of the unborn child as bringing the crazy man the love that children get from others. Mehdi was scared, but was unbothered, seeing it as nothing but pointless words that have no meaning. But since my friend was really scared because the spell was given to him, he consulted with his roommate, psychology student. He advised him to burn the spell to break it, if it had any real effect, and to relieve himself from the unwelcome thoughts that it would invite into his mind if it was kept on him. Mehdi and I went out into the roof of the house and burned the spell together. Skip forward a couple of days. Mehdi and I were walking together back from the usual cafe that we sit in, and for some reason he told me to go down a path that we never took together before. And it's completely on the opposite side away from where we live. I said yes, and we went for a walk until we arrived at the same villa that he got the piece of paper from, and we saw the same guy that gave him the spell standing behind the fence with his face between bars of steel and staring aimlessly at nothing. At this point, Mehdi and I no longer cared about the supposed hex or curse that he cast upon us, so we jokingly agreed to approach the guy and speak to him. The moment he saw us, he called us as we were approaching him, and we started talking to him. He introduced himself as Hamid. The villa he's in is supposed to be his uncle's, and so is another cafe in front of it. We didn't believe him as he was obviously not all that sane in the head. He can speak and understand well enough, but something about his empty, emotionless gaze and the super relaxed posture, as if he doesn't have a single care in the world, as well as the way that he speaks completely spontaneously, without even thinking, kind of screams insanity. We asked him about the little piece of paper that he gave us. He said a police officer gave it to him. An obvious lie. We told him that we took the piece of paper to a, FQIH. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Fuck. FQIH. A key. Fki? The Moroccan Islamic version of a priest. Excuse me. And he simply answered something akin to, "Yeah, sure you did." He saw right through our lie. As we were talking, he started giving us commands as if we were his servants, but in doing so in a completely straightforward, non-condescending way, as if it's just natural for him to speak and ask people for things and just get them for free. He asked us to go get him a simple soft drink from a nearby grocery store, to which we declined, but he insisted. So we told him to wait until tomorrow, and we'll get it for him. Fast forward till tomorrow. We go past the villa again, and he's there, his head between the steel bars of the fence, staring aimlessly at nothing, his big round eyes and toothless mouth gaping open. We saw him, said our hellos, and immediately he started giving commands. "Go get my drink now." His commands became more assertive, but still non-condescending, and straightforward. The way that he speaks is kind of like that of a child. So we told him to ask us nicely and we'll get it for him. He did, and we went to go get him the drink. When he got it, he simply threw it to the ground and asked us for a bar of soap. We asked him what he wants to do with the soap. He said he'll be going to a traditional bathhouse and he needs soap to clean himself. So we got him the soap. He threw it on the ground next to him too. We asked for something else. He asked for something else. And we said, "That's enough. We'll be going back home." And we did. I'm writing this at the usual cafe I sit at, waiting for my friend Mady to come over, so we can visit this guy again. My friend and I joke about the hex having actually worked on us. That's why we bought him that stuff yesterday and are going to visit him again tonight too. But something deep inside me questions me about it actually being true. What if we did get hexed, and now we're servants to this crazy homeless guy living in the abandoned villa? I actually bought some pizza earlier that I only ate one slice of, and now I'm keeping it for the crazy guy when we go meet him. In fact, it's very likely that the spell didn't work, and we're just doing this because we think it's fun and like talking to the guy. But I can't help thinking that the spell did work. Things and moments to share. Early 90s. My old house definitely felt weird. I had always thought I had seen shadows in the corners, but I just shook it off as I got older. There were 2 times I remember something sounding like it had fallen, a big bang or a boom sound followed by a clattering sound, only to never find anything that had fallen. It happened once when my mom and me were in the kitchen, and we went to the basement to explore what it was, but found nothing. Moved in 2000. A new house didn't have any weird feelings or events, other than the first night. I could have sworn I saw someone move my bedroom door. I thought it was my dad walking by, but when I got up to ask him, he was downstairs watching TV and said he never walked by my door or moved it. I always felt it was my dad's father checking up on him. Didn't have any real experiences outside of that. A couple people in the woods smoking a joint. I was hitting it hard and I felt like either a bear was coming or we were being watched. Got in the car shortly after. Then my mom passes away in 2010s. At the time I wasn't religious, but a couple of weird things happened. The last word she told me was that I was a good person, which was weird because at that time I was always thinking about how I needed to work towards being a better person. Then she was supposed to be pretty much brain dead from a stroke. But the first day in the hospice, when I arrived, she had a huge smile on her face and looked right at me as I entered. I didn't know what to think at the time, but now I feel like it was her way of saying goodbye. She never did it again, at least that I saw, and she passed away a few days after. I remember distinctly having a dream with her a while after. We were at our old church, and she was in the foyer chatting with someone. I noticed her sitting talking to her friend, and I think I said, "Mom?" But all I remember is that she looked right at me smiling. I felt a bunch of positive emotions, just pure love. Later, I remember I was chatting with a woman, and she just happened to mention something about finding dimes left behind by her loved ones. What was so weird about that? Since my mom had passed, I had noticed specifically dimes popping up in weird places, and when this lady told me that, it felt like it all clicked. It even happens now, and I always think of my mom and dad. After my mom passed, I was more open to everything, since my mom was really spiritual. Some things she had told me before, just general stuff, started to come true, so I knew I had underestimated her teachings. A few years after that, my dad sadly passed away as well. Both were tough to let go, but I was more understanding this time than with my mom. Back then I was very angry, but now I realized this was just how things had to go. My dad didn't pop up for a while in my dreams, and I was worried. Then one day, I had an extremely vivid dream. I guess I should have mentioned that I usually don't remember my dreams, so these sticking with me means more, I suppose. Basically, in the dream, I'm in bed, and someone is coming to smother me with a pillow, but I see it coming, so I'm ready to explode when they do. As I do in the dream, I wake up. The lighting of the room is the exact same as in the dream, fairly bright and sunny. I'm a little shaken up by the dream because I couldn't see the figure in the dream, just the pillow. My room door was closed, and I hear my dog whining outside, probably to go outside. I open the door, and much to my dismay, my dog has shit everywhere on the main floor. It took me a while to put the dream and the dog pooping together, but then I realized someone woke me up, and it had to be my dad. He was always funny about waking me up when I was a kid, and he was very close with my dog. I did see my dad in later dreams, a few times with my mom with his grayish hair, and then once looking much younger, which admittedly threw me off. I had only seen a few pictures of him from the 80s, and even a fewer from the 70s. But it was him for sure. I did notice my mom in my first dream encounter, and she looked kind of younger too. That's it for the stories today, guys. I apologize with my attempts at trying to pronounce Moroccan, which I admittedly have zero experience in. But I hope none of you wake up with your dog having pooped everywhere in your main floor. Till next time.